Well, hello there, my internet friends. My name is John Jagsney. I'm a 3D artist and motion graphics thing. I do stuff. But today, I'm embarking on a journey, and that is getting into 3D character animation. Now, when it comes to 3D character animation, there are people who get entire degrees all about that. So this video is going to kick off a sort of vlog-style journey on how I have discovered hiccups and issues and problems. Some of it due in part to myself, some of it due in part to the software, combination of both. And I want to show you some of the things I'm running into. So, my current project I'm doing is a Halo 3 trailer recreation, a second one. And what I'm doing is I am trying to rig this Master Chief model that I found online, and it is rigged in a T-pose, but there's some hiccups. Now, I'm coming at this as a Cinema4d user, so I like doing the product videos in Octane and Redshift, but character animation is something that is harder than I thought. So let's start that process. Right now, I have some motion capture that I am going to import onto this character. So I'm just going to go to my MoCap, 3D MoCap, and I know that I want this one right here. You could use the Human IK, which is a standard Maya plugin, or what I'm going to be using for this tutorial is this Mixamo option. Now, I will say directly from Rococo, they do recommend using the Maya Human IK rig most of the time. So my reasoning for bringing this up is that I have this 3D character here, this Master Chief model. So I bring up this Master Chief model because whenever you're starting out character animation for the very first time, you probably don't have the full skill set to take a character from start to finish. So you're going to try and find a model that you're excited about and want to animate. You never know how that model is rigged. So, for example, if I were to take all of this stuff and copy this and then paste this into my FBX, there's a big problem. The character scale does not match. So what I have to do is I have to rescale this down. So that's the first thing you might run into when it comes to doing 3D character animation for the first time. The models that you're working with might just be weird because someone else modeled it in a different program, rigged it in a different program, etc. So the first step that I'm going to take here is I'm going to rescale this down. So I'm going to just undo that. I'm going to go to my model here, and I know that the scale is about like 7%. So what I want to do is I want to go to project scale and then target scale 0.01775, not 17, 0.075, 7%, give or take. Boop, scale him down, and now I have a character that is correctly scaled to Cinema4d. So I can drop in this figure, and I know Master Chief is a very tall person, so I'm making him just a little bit taller than the standard mannequin in Cinema4d, and I believe this mannequin is about 5'10", give or take. So that's the first step that you want to do when it comes to doing character animation in Cinema. You want to scale the character down to what you need it to be for the Mixamo rig to work well. So the next step when it comes to this is I want to be able to take this character animation, and if I play it back, we can see that I have some Rococo stuff trying to do an animation. So I'm just going to take this and copy it and paste it into my project file. Extend out my frames. Boop. So now the first goal is to get this character stuff onto my Master Chief, which is actually really easy in Cinema. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my armature of the character, go to the hips, right click, and go to rigging tags and character definition. Now from here I'm going to open the manager, and I am going to extract skeleton. It's going to find all of the joints that are in the model that I need, and then I'm going to go to frame 0 and set reference pose. So this is just going to be like T-pose. That's the base pose. Next, I'm going to go to the Mixamo hips, right-click, rigging tags, and character definition. Do the same thing. Double-click on that. We just close that window really quick. Retry one more time. Open manager, excuse me, and extract skeleton and set reference pose. So now nothing's changed, but if I were to animate this, I could go back to that T-pose. So that's the first step when it comes to this. Now, what is super easy about this in Cinema is that if I go to create solver on the Master Chief hips, character definition, create solver, now I can go to my Mixamo character definition. I'm just going to name this, so it's called MC Animation 00. Just so I know what's happening, I go to the character definition tag on my Master Chief hips, and I drag this tag in. Oh, excuse me. I'm going to rewind that. Not the character definition. I go to the solver, and I'm going to drag this onto the source character. So now, Master Chief is doing the thing. Awesome. Looks good, right? But here's an issue when it comes to doing motion capture, and that is I recorded based on my proportions, and the Rococo thinks that my knee is all the way back here, but Master Chief's hand needs to go here. So when it comes to doing this, the easiest way to make this work is to like build an IK rig from this. And I'm just like, okay, sure. So first off, what I'm going to do is I am going to go to my hips, and I'm going to middle mouse click this. Boop. And it's going to select all of those joints in the Master Chief hierarchy. I'm going to open up my timeline and see all of these keyframes. There's a lot. Obviously, we need to clean it up a little bit. So let us do just that. So I'm going to save a copy, Control-Alt-S, just so that I can go back just in case. Select my hips, and because there's so many keyframes, it is slow. It can be very slow. Make sure everything's selected, drag this in, and then on frame 0, I'm going to go to function, bake objects, and do not create a copy. So I'm going to uncheck that, and it's going to make a keyframe for every single joint in this hierarchy. So it's going to bake down. And once that's done, we'll obviously get this big batch of keyframes. And if I scrub through, hey, look, there's the thing. Now the benefit of this is now I can go to my Mixamo hips, delete that. It's going to take a second because there's so much stuff. Get rid of the other character, delete that, and hey, look, super awesome. The Master Chief is still doing his thing. So now I need to get this set up for Cinema and doing an IK rig. Now, what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to go to the character tab and then character, and it's going to add this character object in our object manager. And I want to start with a template, and that's going to be the Mixamo control rig, because the goal is to be able to move these joints where I can very easily move the wrist and then the ankle, or not the ankle, herp derp, the shoulder joint and elbow joint will follow along accordingly. Because if I were to, let's say, just theoretically select one of my joints, such as the left elbow. Alright, so we'll go right. Oh, don't do that. If I were to select the left elbow here, left forearm, excuse me, right forearm, how about we know our directions? And if I move this around, obviously that's it's moving, and we could add animation layers on top of this so that we could non-destructively edit this, or you could hate yourself and go into the animation curves and try and mess with this, but don't do that. Not smart. So if I wanted to move this accordingly, I would first have to move the right shoulder over, down, boop. Then I have to move the right arm, forearm, and get this to be in position, and then adjust those keyframes. That's not what I'm looking for. So I'm not baking any of these keyframes down, so I can just play that back and hey, look, nothing's changed. But I want to set this up in something called an IK rig, like I said, where this instead will allow me to move the wrist, and then the wrist and the shoulder and the elbow will all work in conjunction with each other. So that's why we have this character object in our scene. So I'm going to go to the Mixamo control rig template on the character. I'm going to add a root. I'm going to add a pelvis. I'm going to add an arm, but I'm going to hold control and shift, and that will add a left arm and a right arm. Then I'm going to add some legs with control and shift. And then on the left arm and right arm selected, I'm going to add some hands. Now, if I were to try and get this set up right away, there's one issue. If I were to select the adjust mode right here, nothing happens. And the first thing that you need to know is that your hierarchy has to contain some specific characters for the Mixamo control rig. So I'm going to go back to build. Now I'm going to hit Shift C on my keyboard and type in naming tool. And when I do that, it brings up this mode. And what we're going to do is we're going to select all of our hips, naming tool again, excuse me, and we're going to add a prefix. And that's going to be Mixamo rig : and then replace name. And it's going to take a second because it's adding all those characters. So now if I go to my character, let's just save really quick. Boop. And then we're going to hit adjust, and hey, look, now the control rig is connected to all of the joints. This looks super promising, right? So now what I need to do is I need to go to my animate, and there's all of these options here. The first thing that we have to do is we have to retarget the rig, because the rig is not attached to the skeleton. The skeleton is the joint hierarchy, and what I want to do is if I move this control point right here for the wrist, everything else should follow. So, okay, this sounds legit. Okay, so what we need to do is go to our character, master controls, and then we click on retarget all. And it doesn't seem like anything happens. So now what we have to do is we have to take the weights of the character. Now, if you don't know what weights are, weights is basically how the mesh, how your model will deform based on the joint position. So if I close all of that and I see this little kettlebell icon, I very much appreciate that as someone who uses dumbbells and stuff. The little weight tag, we can see that all of the armor has a color, and that is a indication of which joint is affecting which piece of armor. So this joint is this yellow, this orange armor is the spine, etc. So what I need to do is go to my character, master controls, weight transfer, and I need to drag in all of these geometries into the weight transfer. Now this is where it gets hairy, and it's kind of a bummer, and this is kind of why I wanted to make this vlog. I'm gonna hit Control Alt S on my keyboard just to save another iterative copy, and then I'm going to hit transfer weights, and something happened. The original character model was built in an A pose and then re-rigged into a T pose. This is just how I got it from TurboSquid. And this is the first thing that I ran into that I was just pulling my hair out. So let's say hypothetically I wanted to move this rig. I get this weird, funky, like this does not work. And I've spent hours trying to get this to work, get it to figure it out, and it was not cooperating with me. So now what I want to do is I want to bring this workflow into Maya. I am not a Maya user at all, but it works. So let's open up Maya and talk about all of that. All right, so I'm in Maya and I have my Master Chief model, and now the goal is to do pretty much the same thing. So I did do a little bit of a change. I will say I did rescale this, and I have a model that I have that is just a rescaled version down to that 7% that I did earlier. But now what I can do is I can go into my MoCap folder and I can find that same MoCap. Now I'm going to use the Human IK rig because that's just built for Maya and better. But you could do the same thing, and they're about the same height. So okay, cool. Now what's really cool about Maya is I have this nice little character tab, so I can add a character. So let's first select the hips of our Master Chief and click on create definition, and then we can open up this folder. Select my hips, open up the folder, and I know it's the Human IK. And that's going to go okay. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to set it to none, and then I'm going to click on create character definition, and then I'm going to select my mocap data and do the same exact thing, and I'm going to load up this Human IK, and that should match. Now I'm going to go to my character 1, and that should be my Master Chief model, and then I will set the source to be character 2. So now if I play this back, hey look, that's easy. All right, so now what if I wanted to animate and do those same changes in the Master Chief model? So I can go back to frame 0, click on my main character, and then this little blue magic button. I can go to bake and then bake to control rig. And then what that's going to do is I can now add the IK animation onto my Master Chief model. So I'm going to let this finish out. And once that does, we can see that everything is baked down. Very cool. And the best part, I can start adding animation layers. So I'm going to go to my character, and this thing, I don't know what it is. I'm not a Maya user, let's be real. And I'm going to add a animation layer, and then I can scrub through and find where I want to change some of the animation. So just scroll through, boop, come on. Boop, all right. So boop, where's my wrist? Let's find the right wrist effector. And then what we're going to do is on that animation layer, we're going to hit S on the keyboard right about here. That should add a keyframe. And then I'm going to go to where there is the contact, and I am going to just push this over where it needs to be. Why is it not doing it? Boop.
2,000 years later.
Well, first off, I guess what it's worth showing is now I can move this wrist, and hey look, the shoulder and the elbow are following based on the wrist position. So then I'm going to just scrub through and say, go, you know what? Get rid of those. So we rewind it a little bit because Maya is still something I am diving into. And first I'm going to add an empty layer, and then I'm going to lock the base animation. So I can't adjust any of the mocap. This is a non-destructive workflow. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on my animation layer, and let's say I want to add a keyframe like right here. So I'm going to right click on that and select add selected after I select my right wrist, and add selected objects. Okay, then we add a keyframe right there. Then we scooch forward in time just a little bit, move that forward. Why are you just snapping back? Maybe we just add a new keyframe right there, and then boop, boop, boop. Boop. So, herp derp, I know that was kind of fast and like what was happening right there. But basically now I have this new set of keyframes, and I wish I could figure out some of the keyboard shortcuts of Maya. But now the wrist is over there. We can go back to that wrist selector and move it exactly where I want it to be. Boop. And then hit S again just to reposition that. That looks not quite right. Boop. 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 Cool. So now that wrist is going to go right there, and I realize that it does a little weird hiccup thing. So I'm just going to push that up right there and just add those keyframes. Nope. Spacebar does not work as I want it to in Maya. So you get the idea. The goal here is to get an IK rig, because now what I can do is I can add yet another animation layer, and we'll call this leg fixes, and I can scrub through to the very beginning of the animation. And I recorded with knees bent here because I knew that Rococo likes foot contact on the ground. So I want now to have these legs be extended. So I'm gonna call this leg fixes, and I realize there's some weird casing things that these layers need. So now I can add a keyframe at like right here, and add selected. Then we'll go to the right ankle effector and add selected, and then add a keyframe. Add a keyframe by hitting S, scrub through just a little bit, pull this down and out. Boop. S. Then I go through, pull this down and out, boop. And that's going to mess up the animation a little bit, but that's okay. Let's find these keyframes, and we're going to take these keyframes at the very beginning. We're going to copy them and then paste them once I start moving. Boop. Come on. Boop. And then I'm going to take these other keyframes. And this is definitely not the workflow that I recommend, because this is purely for documentation purposes. So I know this is a long one, but if we play that back now, Maya is weird. Boop. So I don't need that first part. That's totally fine. That's doing its thing. Scrubbing through, hit the play button, and then they snap back to their original position. Not quite, but you get the idea. I can easily move around the joints, and the purpose of this video was to showcase the differences between the software and how apparently Maya just picked up the animation so much easier. And then the final thing is, when it comes to doing character animation like this, there's always going to be some little hiccups and jitters with MoCap. So one of the things I found really fascinating is all of the sort of animation curves inside this character animation. So one of the things that I liked that Sam from Rococo showed me is I can select all of the keyframes and I can go to curves and then this smooth filter. Let's just undo that because there's a sort of setting I should change. Come on, Maya. Cooperate with me, please. And then he said just crank this value to 3. And we can just look at that. And then let's go to our leg fixes. And I'm just going to delete these extra keyframes that we added because we don't need to see them right now. I know I fudged something up. Boop. We're just going to mute that layer. Hey, look, that's off. Sorry for the little hiccup, but one of the cool ways about this being non-destructive is you can just turn off those layers. If it doesn't work for you, you can just start over. But that Butterworth filter, it gives it a more hand-animated look according to Sam from Rococo. It just looks a little bit smoother, and some of those micro jitters just end up going away. So this is going to be the end of this part. I hope you, if you watched all of this, you enjoyed it. And I hope that Cinema4d does discover ways to make all of this work in the near future, because I am a cinema user and I would like to stay in the software. However, I now have a Maya license because some of the tools here are just a little bit easier, especially with the control rig and whatnot. So I will leave it there. Let me know if you have questions, comments, concerns, whatever else. And I will leave you with my usual tip, and that is to eat 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight, and you'll make some. Goodbye, my friends. Bye.